Hey everyone, we're working hard to get our first 1,000 subscribers, sign up and you won't regret it. I didn't learn Spanish in a classroom. I learned it the way some people learn prayer, quietly, repeatedly, until it becomes instinct. My grandmother's home health aide, a Dominican woman named Lydia, watched me after school when my parents worked double shifts. She spoke to me in Spanish because she missed home. I answered in Spanish because I didn't want her to feel alone. By the time I was 16, I could follow baseball commentary, argue about rent, and understand the difference between a joke and an insult without needing a dictionary. I just never advertised it. Not at work. Not in college. Not even to my fiancée. Sierra and I had been together 2.5 years. She was the kind of person who could walk into a room and make strangers feel like they'd known her forever. She was also the kind of person who believed privacy was the same thing as secrecy, and that little omissions kept relationships light. It wasn't a red flag at first. It was texture. Some things don't need to be shared, she'd say, smiling like it was wisdom. And maybe that was true. Until it wasn't. The call happened on a Tuesday, one of those plain, forgettable days that feels like filler in your life story until it becomes the scene you replay for months. We were in my apartment. My place, technically. Sierra spent most nights there anyway, leaving hair ties on my coffee table and little sticky notes on my fridge with reminders like "Don't forget your lunch." She was in the bathroom getting ready for dinner with my parents. My mom had been making a point of seeing Sierra more often since the engagement, and Sierra had been making a point of looking like she belonged in family photos. I was in the kitchen, rinsing strawberries in a colander, half listening to a podcast. Then Sierra's phone rang. She'd left it on the couch, face down, vibrating against the cushion like it was impatient. The caller ID flashed a name I'd seen before, Tio Rafa. She'd mentioned him a handful of times. Always in a casual way. Like he was family but also like he wasn't supposed to be discussed too much. A relative in Florida. A guy who helped with things. Someone who knew how to handle paperwork. The phone kept buzzing. I watched it, not because I wanted to snoop, but because it was rude to let it go to voicemail if it was family. Sierra called from the bathroom that she couldn't grab it because she had mascara on one hand and a curling iron in the other. "Can you answer and tell him I'll call back?" she said. I hesitated. Something about answering someone else's phone felt like stepping over a line even with permission. But we were engaged. We were planning a wedding. We were about to merge our lives. People answered each other's phones sometimes. So I picked it up. "Hello?" I said. Silence. Then a man's voice, low and fast, in Spanish. Not hello. Not "Quién es?" Just immediate, urgent, like he'd been mid-thought and assumed the person on the other end was Sierra. I didn't respond right away. I didn't need to. He kept going. And in that first 10 seconds, my whole body went cold. He said Sierra's name like a warning. He said papers, like it was a problem. He said firma, signature, like a lever that needed to be pulled. Then he said something that snapped the kitchen into focus like someone cranked the brightness up too high. He said the word boda, wedding. Then, no sete olvide lo del poder. Antes de la boda. Don't forget the power of attorney. Before the wedding. I stood there with strawberries dripping on my wrist, trying to breathe normally. Trying to decide if I'd misheard. He kept talking, still in Spanish, still assuming I was Sierra. He mentioned my last name. My full last name. Not common. Not something you guess. Then he said, "La cuenta," the account. And then he said a phrase that didn't sound like romance or family planning or harmless paperwork. It sounded like a plan. Después del matrimonio, es más fácil. No pelees con él. Que se sienta seguro. After the marriage, it's easier. Don't fight with him. Let him feel safe. My brain tried to supply innocent explanations. Maybe Sierra was planning a surprise. Maybe my mom was involved. Maybe it was some weird cultural thing. But then he said, very plainly. "Y si pregunta por qué, dil que es por los impuestos. Los gringos siempre creen eso." If he asks why, tell him it's for taxes. Americans always believe that. The strawberries slipped in the colander. One bounced onto the counter and rolled toward the edge like it wanted to escape. I gripped the phone harder, and that's when I realized my hand was shaking. I should have hung up. I should have called Sierra into the kitchen and asked her, right then, would the phone still live? But something in me, something animal, wanted to know how far it went. So I stayed quiet. He continued. He talked about timing. About antes de que tu sugro cambie el testamento, before my father changes the will. My father doesn't talk about wills in casual conversation. He talks about grilling and whether my car needs new tires. He doesn't give speeches about money. But my dad owns a small construction company that he built from nothing. He employs a dozen guys, some of whom have worked with him longer than I've been alive. He's not rich, but he's comfortable. He's the kind of man who keeps things in a folder and doesn't announce what's inside. Hearing someone on Sierra's phone mention my dad's will like it was a countdown clock made me feel stupid in a way I'd never felt before. Like my life had been an open door and I'd been proud of how trusting I was. The voice softened, then sharpened again. Why silse pone difficile, tu sabes? If he gets difficult, you know. The implication sat there, heavy. Not a threat in the movie sense. Something worse. Something real people say when they think they're being careful. I swallowed and forced my voice to work. Sierra can't come to the phone right now. My accent probably sounded like any other American guy stumbling through a phrasebook. On the other end, the man paused. I could almost hear him recalibrating. Then, in English, slow and suspicious, "Who is this?" "My name's Graham," I said, keeping it light. "Her fiancée. She's getting ready. I can tell her you called." Silence again. The kind of silence that feels like someone staring at you through the receiver. Then he hung up. No goodbye. No apology. Just dead air. I stared at the black screen like it might explain itself. In the bathroom, the curling iron clicked off. Sierra's voice floated out, cheerful, normal. "Who was it?" I looked down at the strawberries like they were evidence. I told myself, don't overreact. Don't accuse without facts. You could be misunderstanding. But my stomach already knew the truth before my brain was willing to say it. I walked into the hallway and met Sierra at the door of the bathroom. She looked perfect, hair curled, lipstick applied, earrings catching the light. The kind of woman you'd trust with your future because she looked like she belonged there. She took her phone from my hand, glanced at the missed call screen, and laughed like it was nothing. "Oh my God," she said. "That's just my uncle. He's dramatic." I watched her thumb fly across the screen to text him. Her face didn't change. Her eyes didn't flicker. She didn't look nervous. She looked annoyed. And that scared me more than panic would have. Because either she was innocent, or she was practiced. That night, while she slept beside me with one hand resting on my chest like I was hers already, I stared at the ceiling and made a decision I still hate admitting. I was going to find out what Sierra was really doing. And I wasn't going to tell her I understood a single word of Spanish. Not yet. Because the next time she took a call she didn't think I could understand. I wanted to be ready. And I wanted proof. By morning, I had a plan. By afternoon, I'd learned something that made the call sound almost gentle by comparison. The easiest part was pretending nothing had changed. I made coffee. I joked about my dad's obsession with grilling. I listened to Sierra talk about bridesmaid dresses like we were just another couple sliding toward a wedding date. Inside, I felt like I was walking around with a cracked rib, everything normal hurt. I kept replaying the call, word by word, like I could rearrange it into something harmless. But the phrases didn't allow for that. Power of attorney. After the marriage, it's easier. Let him feel safe. The will. It wasn't romance language. It was operational. The hard part was not letting my face give me away every time Sierra touched me. 2 days after the call, she took another one from Tio Rafa while I was in the living room. She stepped onto my balcony, thinking the glass door muffled everything. She spoke softly, the way people do when they think secrecy is polite. I muted the TV and listened. I wasn't eavesdropping in the usual sense. I wasn't pressing my ear to a wall. I was sitting on my couch, in my own home, listening to a conversation about me. Her Spanish was fluent, more fluent than she'd ever hinted. She used idioms you don't pick up from Duolingo. She laughed in a way that sounded different than her English laugh. Sharper. Less, curated. I caught fragments. Mentions of firma again. Mentions of papals. Mention of tu futura casa, your future house, as if my home was already a chess piece. At one point she said, "Él no sospecha nada." He suspects nothing. It landed like a slap. Not because it hurt my pride. Because it told me she believed her performance was working. When she came back inside, she smiled and asked if I wanted Thai or pizza. I almost laughed. Instead, I said pizza, because it was the kind of detail couples remember later when they're telling the story of how everything started to fall apart. That night, I did something I'd never done in a relationship. I looked through her things. Not her phone. Not yet. That felt like an act that would turn me into someone I didn't want to be. But her purse was on the kitchen counter, open. Receipts spilling out. A folded envelope tucked into the inner zipper pocket. It wasn't locked away. It wasn't even hidden well. It was simply there, like Sierra didn't believe I'd ever look. Inside the envelope were copies, photocopies, of documents with my name on them. Not my signature. My name typed. My address. My date of birth. And a scanned image of my driver's license. The air around me seemed to thicken. My first thought was, how? My second thought was worse, why? There was also a printed email chain. In Spanish. I didn't translate it word for word. I didn't need to. The subject lines did enough damage. One was about legal steps after marriage. One included the words account access and authorization. Another included my father's company name. I sat at my kitchen table with those papers and felt something settle in my chest that wasn't grief yet. It was the moment before grief, when you realize you're about to lose the person you thought you were marrying. I took photos of everything with my phone and put it all back exactly how I found it. Then I called my friend Colton. Colton is the kind of guy who doesn't panic. He was a roommate in college, now a paralegal. He's seen enough messy divorces and custody fights to treat betrayal like a math problem. I didn't tell him everything. Just that I needed to talk. Urgently. In person. We met at a coffee shop near his office the next morning. I slid my phone across the table with the photos pulled up. He scrolled. His face stayed neutral in that trained way legal people have. But his eyes sharpened. "What is this?" he asked. I kept my voice low. "My fiancée's. I think she's trying to get me to sign something." He stared at one of the documents longer than the others. "Graham," he said carefully, "this looks like someone prepping for power of attorney or account access. Maybe more." "More like what?" He hesitated, then tilted the phone back toward me and pointed to a line I hadn't noticed. "See that?" he asked. "That's not just access. That's authority. If you sign this, she could move money, sign for business stuff, act as you." My throat tightened. "But why my dad's company name?" Colton didn't answer right away. He leaned back and looked around the coffee shop like he was scanning for anyone listening. Then he said, "It could be fraud. It could be a setup. It could be a way to make you the fall guy if something happens." The words fall guy made my skin crawl, because it matched the tone of that call. "If he gets difficult, you know." I asked Colton what I should do. He gave me the first real advice that made sense since this started: don't confront her yet. Get a lawyer. And lock down your stuff. So that afternoon I called a family attorney my dad had used years ago for a business contract. Her name was Marisol Vance. Calm voice. Fast mind. She didn't react dramatically when I explained. She asked questions. Simple ones that made the situation feel real. "Do you have shared accounts? Has she asked you to sign anything recently? Does she have copies of your IDs? Are you sure she doesn't know you speak Spanish?" I answered the last question without thinking. "No," I said. "She definitely doesn't." Marisol paused for half a beat. Then she said, "That's an advantage. Use it wisely." She told me to change my passwords, freeze my credit, and quietly move anything important, documents, spare keys, anything with account numbers, out of Sierra's reach. She told me to document everything and not to say a word about Spanish. And then she said something that made my stomach drop again. "If she's trying to get power of attorney before marriage," Marisol said, "she might be rushing for a reason. People rush when a window is closing." "What window?" I asked. Marisol didn't speculate. She just said, "Find out what she thinks she's racing against." That night Sierra brought home a little gift bag, 2 ties and a handwritten note about how excited she was to be officially family. She kissed me and asked if I wanted to set a date. I said yes. Because in that moment, I realized the only way to know how deep this went was to let her keep talking. To let her keep believing I was the easiest man in the world to manipulate. So we picked a date, 8 weeks out. Sierra squealed and hugged me like we just won something. Then she said, casual as breathing, "Oh. Also, my uncle knows someone who can help with paperwork. Like, stuff for taxes and making things easier after we're married." I felt my blood pressure spike, but my face stayed calm. "What kind of paperwork?" I asked. Sierra smiled sweetly. "Just boring adult stuff. You know. Making sure if something happens, I can handle things for you." Her eyes searched my face for a reaction. For fear. For resistance. I gave her none. I nodded like a man in love who trusts his future wife. And Sierra looked relieved. Later that night, after she fell asleep, I opened my laptop and froze my credit with all 3 bureaus. I changed every password. I moved my birth certificate, passport, and the folder with my dad's company documents into a safe deposit box Marisol had recommended. Then I did one more thing. I pulled up my dad's email from the family business account he'd given me access to years ago. And I searched Sierra's name. Nothing. Then I searched Rafa. That's when I found an email from 6 months ago, forwarded to my dad from his accountant. It was in Spanish. The subject line translated in my head instantly. Regarding the trust distribution timeline. My stomach dropped so hard I thought I might actually throw up. Because my father had never mentioned a trust to me. Not once. And apparently, Sierra's uncle knew about it. Which meant Sierra knew too. And if she knew about it, then the wedding wasn't a celebration. It was a deadline. The next morning, I drove to my parents' house without telling Sierra. I needed to see my dad's face when I said the word trust. I needed to know if this was real or if I was spiraling. My dad was in the garage, reorganizing tools he'd reorganized 100 times. He looked up, surprised, when he saw me on a weekday. "You okay?" he asked, immediately scanning me the way parents do even when their kids are grown. I didn't ease into it. "Dad," I said, "do you have a trust?" He blinked, like the question was absurd. Then his expression tightened, like a door quietly closing. "Why?" he asked. I told him the truth, stripped of drama. That Sierra's uncle had mentioned paperwork. That I'd seen a Spanish email subject about trust distribution. That something felt off. My dad didn't blow up. He didn't shout or panic. He just got very still. Then he said, "Come inside." We sat at the kitchen table where I'd done homework as a kid. My mom poured coffee without asking questions, but her hands shook slightly as she set the mugs down. My dad exhaled and rubbed his thumb along the rim of the cup like he was buying time. "Yes," he said. "There's a trust." I stared at him. "Since when?" "Since your grandfather died," he said. It wasn't huge. But it was something. And then, the company did better than I expected. I moved assets into it to protect you and your sister. He said protect the way people say seatbelt, something you don't think about until you need it. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked. My dad looked at me for a long moment. "Because it changes people," he said quietly. "And I didn't want it changing you. Or changing anyone around you." My mom's mouth tightened. "I told him you'd find out eventually." I swallowed. "Sierra found out." My dad's eyes narrowed. "How?" I explained the call. The documents. The uncle. My dad didn't interrupt. But I watched something inside him shift from confusion to anger so controlled it was almost scarier than yelling. When I finished, he stood up and walked to a drawer, pulling out a folder thick with legal papers. He opened it and slid a page toward me. "Read this," he said. I recognized the line immediately. The trust distribution timeline. It wasn't after I got married. It was after I got married and signed a particular authorization that allowed a spouse to assist with management if needed. An authorization that sounded an awful lot like the paper Sierra had. It wasn't automatic gold-digging logic. It was a specific lever. A lever she needed me to pull. My dad sat back down, jaw clenched. "She's trying to get access," he said, voice flat. "Not just to you. To the structure I built so nobody could steal from you." My mom finally spoke. "We liked her," she said softly, almost to herself. "I really liked her." I didn't know what to say to that. Because I had liked her too. Loved her. Proposed to her. I had pictured her in this kitchen one day, laughing with my mom, holding future kids. Now, I pictured her here rifling through a folder when she thought nobody was watching. My dad looked at me. "What do you want to do?" That's the part people don't tell you about betrayal. It turns you into someone who has to decide what kind of damage you're willing to cause in return. A clean break would have been the simplest. Confront her, call it off, warn others. But Marisol's words came back, people rush when a window is closing. If Sierra was part of a bigger plan, if Tio Rafa was more than a nosy relative, walking away quietly might mean she'd just find another target. And I had proof now. A call. Documents. Emails. A timeline. So I told my dad the truth. "I want to end it," I said. "But I also want her to stop." My dad nodded once. "Then do it smart." That afternoon, I met with Marisol again, this time with my dad present. She moved fast, laying out steps like a checklist. We'd create a controlled document Sierra would try to get me to sign, one that looked like what she wanted, but was actually designed to confirm intent and create evidence. We'd keep everything legal. No forged signatures. No shady tricks. Just letting her reveal herself. If Sierra pushed, we'd have grounds to involve law enforcement for identity fraud attempts and conspiracy. At minimum, we'd have enough to warn my bank and protect assets. Marisol drafted a document that was basically a decoy. It referenced spousal assistance and authorization, but included a clear statement in plain English that the signer understood it did not grant ownership or access to the trust, and that any attempt to use it otherwise could be reported. It also included a section where the person requesting the signature had to list why they needed it, and which accounts they intended to assist with. A trap, but a lawful one. A trap built from clarity. The next move was mine. That evening, I came home acting normal. Sierra was on the couch scrolling wedding venues like everything in our life was sweet and stable. She looked up and smiled. I was thinking, maybe a smaller ceremony. Less stress. And we could do paperwork sooner. Just to get ahead of everything. Ahead of everything. I sat beside her and let my arm rest around her shoulders. I felt her relax into me like she'd earned it. I talked to a lawyer today, I said casually. Sierra stiffened just slightly. Almost invisible, but I felt it. For what? She asked. Just planning, I said. My dad has business stuff. It's boring, but you know how parents get. Anyway, Marisol drafted something that might make things easier for us after we're married. Like if one of us gets sick or whatever. Sierra's eyes brightened. Exactly. That's what I mean. I pulled the decoy document up on my phone and handed it to her like it was no big deal. She skimmed it too quickly, moving her eyes over the parts that mattered like she'd already seen something similar. Then she looked at me, smiling. We should sign it soon. Sure, I said. But the lawyer said it's best if you fill out the section about why you need it, so everything's clean. Sierra's smile faltered for a fraction of a second. Then she laughed lightly. Clean, she repeated. Okay. She took my phone into the bedroom to read it more carefully. I sat on the couch, staring straight ahead, hearing her footsteps move back and forth as she paced while reading. Then, from the bedroom, her voice floated out. Not English. Spanish. Soft, urgent. And she wasn't talking to me. She'd called him. Tío Rafa. I stayed still, heart pounding, as Sierra spoke the words she thought I couldn't understand. And when I heard what she said next, I realized the trust wasn't the real prize. It was just the first step. Because Sierra wasn't trying to steal from my father. She was trying to make me the one who took the fall. Sierra's Spanish on the phone was different than her English in the apartment. In English, she was warm and polished. In Spanish, she sounded efficient. Like someone reading off a playbook. She told him I'd gone to a lawyer. She said it like it was an obstacle, not a boundary. Then she said something that made my mouth go dry. El firmara. Pero hay que moverlo rápido. Si no, lo hacemos con la compañía. He'll sign. But we have to move fast. If not, we do it with the company. My mind tried to catch up. Do what with the company? She continued, voice lower, like she didn't trust even the walls. She mentioned transfers and documents, and then, clear as day. Que parezca que fue él. Make it look like it was him. My stomach turned. Not just stealing. Framing. I stayed on the couch, breathing quietly, every muscle locked. I wasn't hearing gossip. I was hearing intent. A few minutes later, Sierra came out of the bedroom smiling like she'd been reading Pinterest vows. Babe, she said, holding my phone. This looks good. I forced my face to cooperate. Yeah? She sat beside me and touched my arm. We can sign it this weekend. Maybe after brunch with your parents? I nodded slowly, like I was considering schedules. Inside, I was making a different plan. Because at this point, ending the engagement wasn't enough. If Sierra and her uncle were willing to make me the paper trail, they could ruin my life even without marrying me. They already had my ID. They already had copies. They already had a strategy. So I did the thing I didn't want to do, but should have done earlier. I asked Marisol if we could involve a professional. Not police, yet. Something quieter. Marisol recommended a licensed private investigator she'd worked with before, a man named Dennis Hart, ex-insurance fraud. The kind of guy who didn't break laws, he just found the parts people left exposed. Dennis met me in a parking lot like it was a spy movie, but he talked like an accountant. People like this, he said, tapping the folder of evidence I brought, rarely start with you. You're a chapter, not the whole book. He ran background checks on Tío Rafa. Not the nickname. The real name Sierra had used on an old piece of mail in her purse. Rafael Alvarez. Dennis came back within 48 hours. Rafael Alvarez wasn't just a dramatic uncle. He had a record, nothing huge that made headlines, but enough. Fraud-related charges in another state that had been plead down, a civil judgment tied to financial services, a history of shell business names that popped up and vanished like mayflies. And here was the worst part. Sierra wasn't his niece. There was no family connection on paper. No shared surname in records, no marriage link, no adoption. Which meant Tío wasn't a title. It was a role. A handler. A partner. Dennis also found a pattern. Women who dated men with business ties, short engagement windows, sudden paperwork requests, then messy breakups with money missing or debts mysteriously appearing. One of those men had filed a report saying his identity had been used to open accounts. Another had claimed his business had been used as a front for transactions he didn't authorize. None of the cases had stuck well enough to land someone in prison. Because most victims didn't have what I had. A recorded call in Spanish. And a fiancé who still believed I was clueless. Marisol's advice was blunt: if you want justice, you need her to put it in writing. Or you need her to try it while you're protected. So we set the stage. Saturday morning, Sierra suggested brunch at a trendy place near downtown. She dressed like a future wife meeting future in-laws. She laughed at my dad's jokes and called my mom once by accident and played it off like it was cute. After brunch, back at my apartment, I said I'd printed the document. I told her Marisol said it would be best if we did it with a witness, just to keep it official and clear. Sierra hesitated. A witness? Yeah, I said, easy. Colton can swing by. He's close. It's just signing and done. Sierra's eyes flicked away for half a second. Calculation. Then she smiled. Sure. Fine. Colton arrived with a calm face and a messenger bag. He didn't act like a cop. He acted like a bored guy helping friends with paperwork. I placed the decoy document on the table. Marisol wants us to fill out this section, I said, pointing. The part about why you need it and what accounts. Sierra picked up the pen. Okay. And here's what I'll never forget. She didn't ask questions. She didn't say, this is unnecessary. She didn't say, let's wait until after the wedding. She wrote. She wrote that she needed authority to assist with business accounts, and she listed my dad's company name. Then she wrote something that made Colton's eyebrows lift for the first time. She wrote that she needed it before the wedding date to avoid delays. When she finished, she slid it toward me like it was the most normal thing in the world. See, she said. Easy. I stared at the paper, pen in my hand, and felt a strange calm come over me. Because the moment you stop hoping someone is innocent, you stop being confused. You start being clear. I looked up at Sierra. You're fluent, I said quietly. She blinked. What? In Spanish, I said. You're fluent. Her face changed in a way I can't fully describe. Not panic at first. More like, the mask slipping because the skin underneath didn't match. What are you talking about? She said, too quickly. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't slam the table. I didn't do anything dramatic. I just said, I answered your uncle's call. I understood every word. Sierra's mouth opened slightly, then closed. Colton stayed silent, watching, ready. I kept going, calm and steady. He told you to get power of attorney before the wedding, I said. He told you to let me feel safe. He talked about my dad's will like it was a deadline. And you told him today you'd make it look like it was me. Sierra's eyes darted to Colton. Then to the door. Then back to me. You're insane, she whispered. I smiled, small and tired. If I was insane, you wouldn't be scared. She stood up so fast her chair scraped. Give me my things. You can take your things, I said. But you're not taking anything else from my life. She stepped toward the hallway, and I stood too, not blocking her, just following at a distance. She grabbed her coat, her purse, her shoes. Then she reached for her phone and her gaze flicked toward the kitchen counter where my folder used to sit. Her eyes narrowed like she was trying to remember where I kept it. When she didn't find it, her face tightened. You're making a huge mistake, she said. I nodded once. Maybe. But I'm not making yours. Sierra moved toward the door, and I said one last thing before she left. By the way, I said, your uncle isn't your uncle. That landed harder than anything else. Her expression cracked. For the first time, real fear flashed across her face. Because she understood what that meant. It meant she wasn't just being dumped. She was being exposed. She walked out without another word. The satisfying part, what people want when they hear a story like this, is the revenge scene. Mine wasn't cinematic. It was paperwork, calls, and consequences. Marisol filed a report with the evidence, the document Sierra filled out, the photos of the copies she kept, the timeline email subject, and my written statement about what I heard on the call. Dennis, the investigator, connected Marisol with 2 other victims who finally felt safe enough to cooperate because they weren't alone anymore. Banks got alerts. My credit stayed frozen. My dad's company locked down everything. And Sierra's access to my life closed like a vault. A few weeks later, I learned Sierra had been picked up for questioning after Rafael Alvarez tried to move money using someone else's documents. Not mine, because I'd already blocked the doors. She wasn't a mastermind. She was a participant. A convincing one. The wow twist wasn't that Sierra had been cheating. It wasn't even that she wanted money. It was that she'd chosen me because she thought I was the kind of man who wouldn't notice. A man who would sign what she handed him. A man who wouldn't understand the warning spoken right in front of him. She never found out how long I'd been listening. And I never gave her the satisfaction of seeing me fall apart. The wedding date came and went quietly. My mom returned the dress she'd bought for it. My dad didn't talk about the trust again, but he started calling me more often, just to ask about my day, like he was trying to make sure I still trusted the world. As for me? I kept thinking about something Rafael said on that first call. Americans always believe that. He was wrong. Not because Americans are smarter. Because anyone, can learn a language in a kitchen with strawberries dripping onto their wrist. And sometimes, understanding is the only thing that saves you. And the last thing I heard about Sierra came from Dennis. He told me she'd asked, during questioning, if there was any way the evidence could be thrown out because it was a misunderstanding. Dennis said she looked calm when she asked. Like she was still trying to charm reality into changing. But reality doesn't date you. Reality doesn't get engaged to you. Reality doesn't fall for your smile. Reality just collects receipts. And this time, I had them.